Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. So this podcast is very special to me because I got to have a conversation and record it with a dear friend of mine, Roshi Sanchi Reta Lawler. And she actually inspired me to buy this recording equipment and finally begin the podcast. She's a very special human being to me, and I've really just enjoyed our friendship over the years, and she's become a mentor of mine. Her brother was a mentor of mine, and they probably are the two most profound teachers I've had in my life. And I got to go visit her and sit down in her living room and record this conversation. She's a special human being that has a wealth of knowledge, and it was such a joy to spend this time with her. We got to spend 2 full days together, and I got to have so much deep conversation with her, and I got to learn a lot more about her brother as well from just spending these hours with her. And any time with her is such a gift and an opportunity. So this is very special to me, and I think that anyone who gets to be exposed to her words is lucky. Sanchi was fully ordained as a Zen Buddhist nun, and she's led contemplative retreats and Zen practice around the country for over 35 years. Her professional teachings and offerings have been in creative arts, transpersonal psychotherapy, and shamanic practice, particularly in Celtic and Peruvian indigenous orientations. Her trademark teachings are Coming Full Circle, The Art of Death and Dying, and Winds of Change, and The Art of Engaged Living. She is on the faculty of the Academy for the Love of Learning in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and continues as an advisor for the Spirit Quest Sanctuary in Iquitos, Peru. Sanchi Reta particularly enjoys hosting retreats around the world where the earth energies invite natural entry into contemplative practice. She's a lifelong learner of gardening and particularly loves working with the joy of flowers, medicinal herbs, and her love for trees. She's a special human being. And this conversation was about 1 hour and 20 minutes, but we ended up sitting for many hours over 2 days, and I got to just really soak up so much of her knowledge and wisdom, and just being around her is so special. You can skip forward a couple minutes because in the beginning we just sit down and we breathe together and we sit and connect with our hearts a little bit before the conversation begins. So there is some silence in the beginning, but I just left it in here because that's who she is, and that's what our time together is like. And her brother was like that with me as well. He really taught me to slow down, and she teaches me to slow down too, just by her mode of being. And so, listening to her, you just have to give her space and time. Instead of interjecting, it's nice to just sit and wait. And that's how her brother was too, and it was just so nice to learn from him in that way. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It's very special. Enjoy the show. Hi.
Hello, dear Ryan.
I thought we could first just start off by breathing together.
Sounds good.
Because I know you teach that and we do that, so then we can drop into our hearts, let go of all the day, and just be here together. So however you want to breathe, I'm just going to slow myself down and connect with you. And connect with our hearts together. It's very special to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Ryan, and welcome to my home.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
You are a special person to me, and I don't think you could ever really truly know how special you are to me, but I know that's true for pretty much everyone that's ever met you. And there's a lot of mystery to you, and I've noticed that you don't typically talk about yourself a lot because you're humble. You're always helping other people and serving others. And since the moment I met you, I've been curious about you. And I just want to say thank you, first of all, for all the time we've had together. And any time I get with you is an honor. So,
Thank you, Ryan.
yeah. So, really, there was no aim for this conversation other than to truly learn about you and about your life's work and anything you feel like you want to share throughout this conversation. I just really wanted to capture some of your essence and share it with the people that love you and then expose you to people maybe that have never heard of you. And I think it's important. And so here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. And I'm believing we're recording, which we are. Good. And that's
All
all
right.
that matters.
We've got a studio.
We've got a little studio in your home.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Where should we begin? How we know each other, or
That sounds like a good place to start.
help people to figure out how that we met?
Sure.
Was a special bond through your brother, Don Howard, and I met him through a convergent situation where I went to his last ceremony down in Peru.
Yes.
And we both came to find out that he needed some treatment for his rare blood disorder. And I found out that it was in Arizona that it was possible to experiment and try something that was maybe going to help him.
Yes.
And so I offered to help, and he came and lived with me a couple months later, him and his family. And that's when I met you.
Oh, my goodness, dear Ryan. I mean, the orientation to you as being someone that, you do have a beautiful home, and you have a beautiful casita, would you say?
Yep.
Is
A
what
little
it
guest
is.
house.
And to know that you said to my brother and his family, here is my home. I'm going to live out back, and I'll be coming in and I'll be checking on you, and I will be here to do for you whatever is required.
That's right.
So, in my language of that, being a Zen student, is the act of a bodhisattva, meaning one who has found out that giving their life is having their life, and understanding the reciprocity. I think one Zen master said it really well this way: give until you know that giving is receiving.
Beautiful.
And so to, finally arrive at that level of understanding and insight as an activity that we live from and we are graced from. So, that's how I first met you.
Yeah.
And my orientation to saying hello to you as a man who, through whatever and however, arrived to blessing others and feeling yourself blessed in the giving to other. And I felt you, and I still do, in the living activity of that reciprocity. It's a great, reciprocity is a big deal,
Sure is.
because it's how the universe works.
Yeah.
And to not be oriented toward a misunderstanding that giving of yourself is somehow taking away from yourself. It's such an absurd notion, but I'm sorry to say that that's how a lot of people are in some kind of activity of allowing their life in terms of a very self-centered orientation. And I don't mean that negatively. It's just how the self-identification project works.
Sure.
So roll all that back and say that's how I first met you. And that's how I know my brother was endlessly grateful for all that you were providing, and therefore I was endlessly grateful for all that you were providing. And I walk in and I say hello to this extraordinary man named Ryan.
Oh, well, thank you.
And then we've, had that experience with Howard.
Sure.
A very deep and intimate, in my way of viewing it, there's not a whole lot more intimate than making a final death walk with someone and showing up in the way that is, what do you need, brother?
What do you need?
What do you need?
Yeah.
To then provide the cauldron for a death that can be noble no matter what the circumstance. And there was a lot of suffering for him.
Sure.
And thank you endlessly for providing that depth of heart, which is an inspiring energy that then helps someone through the maze. So I consider you that person.
Well, thank you. I truly did what I felt was the thing to do, and there was no other choice to me other than this is what Spirit told us to do.
Yeah.
And there was no questions asked when I met him and found out what the circumstances were, and I was grateful to have the time and the space and the energy, and somehow my level of consciousness reached a certain point where I knew that that's what I was supposed to do, and I tried to do my best, and come to find out I had all the resources I'd ever need, and I trusted that, and you were one of them. And at the time when I met you, I had no idea how you had worked with this field for so many years. And I could see, before I knew that, I could just feel from you the sincerity, the resourcefulness, the awareness. You were always so aware of so many dimensions of everybody going through each person's needs and wants. And it was just, it was a special thing to have that experience with you being there. And I don't even know what it would have been like without you. So you're a friend for life, and maybe other lifetimes. I feel like I'm lucky to know you.
Indeed we are.
Yeah.
Just to speak to what you just said, what I've learned through all the years of working with people, families, and situations is that everybody that enters into what I call the field of dying time, everybody's affected. Because essentially, because life is going this way again. It's like it has reached a particular level of the cycle, and the cycle is reversing itself rather than fulfilling itself this way.
Right.
Then all of a sudden it's going this way. And that's basic Taoism 101. It's like everything arises and has its time, and then it moves into demise.
Right.
And that's the fulfillment of life. You cannot have one without the other. And we live in a culture where it's so lopsided in terms of the orientation to promotion of whatever it is, which is all good. Nothing wrong with that. But the missing ingredient is, and everything is impermanent, and everything, everybody, everything in existence will turn around and make its demise. So we've forgotten that in this culture. So therefore, whenever someone is dying, everybody that is inside the immediacy of the field, and even outside slightly, but there's an effect. And if there's not some kind of orientation to the acceptance of how all of that is, then that's what we might call suffering.
Right.
And I've been with a lot of different people from a lot of different situations and backgrounds and this and that. You never quite know how it's going to go, even though there might be the thought that, oh yes, I'm da-da-da, or I've whatever. But whenever push comes to shove, you don't really know how it's all going to be working itself out. And therefore, the people around the situation are also deeply affected emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
There's the understanding and the felt sense that, oh, we're in the return mode. And for some people who have not worked with that understanding
Mm-hmm.
on a spiritual level, I would say, then that can come as quite a big shock that that's how it's all going.
Yeah.
And then there can be a lot of grasping and clinging and denying and all kinds of stuff that's
Mm-hmm.
going on to try to help alleviate what is arising through
Yeah.
the field.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in how families, friends,
Yeah.
medical people, whomever and whatever, are also relating to the event of dying.
Mm.
And we don't ever quite know where the support needs to go to be able to help the whole system. It's a system.
Mm-hmm.
And the system is going to be affected.
Right.
And I really don't know. And that goes for cities and nations and countries and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be the movement of the responding whenever the cycle changes.
Right.
So in kind of a basis of being with dying and ultimately the death process, it has to do, can we keep our hearts open in the midst of whatever the circumstances might be? And we don't really know what that's going to be, moment by moment, hour by hour, wherever and however. But if we all come together in a united spirit of being with the arising of whatever is being required for a death that is noble.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean that there may not be a lot of physical suffering or emotional trial and all of that. But can we be with it as a transformative vehicle?
Right.
Because if we can, then we have learned something deeply inside ourselves around the acceptance of what this whole thing is all about and allowing those cycles to come and go, because they do. Spring follows winter.
Right.
It's the way of it. So death to me is, it's at the heart of quintessential understanding and release in relation to who we are fundamentally and who we are together. So that's when you said earlier about, entering in and feeling the whole field here together. We're in this together.
Yeah.
And so that's where that orientation comes from. Because if you leave anything out, then whatever is left out might be the place where the suffering is going to show up sooner or later. So,
how did you get involved in this field? I'm so curious, because when I was living with your brother, I was reading Stephen Jenkinson's work.
Yeah.
Somehow that book came into my life, and I was reading it, and he was even on a book tour, and I went to it while he was living with me.
Yeah.
And then when I went to your 4-day workshop that you've been doing for decades, you were referring a little bit to him, and I've just been now sort of reintroduced or highly introduced to death and dying and wondering so much about it. The Denial of Death, the book, the death phobic culture, my dog Bella dying. It just seems like, okay, my parents have not died yet. But I've been around death my whole career. So to me, it is a fascinating subject, and I could see myself sort of being led into it by curiosity and serendipity and other things. But I'm curious where your path began with this, helping people with the dying process.
Well, I would have to go all the way back to my grandmother.
Awesome.
Howard and I grew up in rural Kentucky, and in the early 50s, down in rural Kentucky, when someone died, they'd be laid out in the parlor. And this, through the advent of World War II and so forth, was the advent of the funeral home mortuary kind of movement. But in my neck of the woods, literally, my grandmother was both a midwife and she also helped people die.
Wow.
So those were two of her specialties,
Yeah.
along with being a naturalist and an herbalist, and
Wow.
knew all of the medicines of rural Kentucky. And so
Wow.
I remember specifically when my mother and father would take Howard and I along with them and going into someone's home, and the body would be laid out in a wood coffin. And everybody would be around, and for the most part, there would be what I would call some keening, meaning that ancient Irish orientation to people, really boo-hooing very loudly.
Okay.
But it was respected as a way of the grief process understanding itself. And I remember that.
Yeah.
And I remember that it would scare me a little bit.
Yeah.
But my mother specifically taught me about how to put my little hand on the hand of a person who had died and feel that.
Okay. Wow. At what age were you, do you think?
Oh, little.
Yeah.
I mean, probably 4, 5,
Wow.
6
That's
or
such a
something like
rare
that.
experience.
So then somewhere along in that, we had funeral homes.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, time would change. But my parents were never, they always had the feeling that the whole family was involved with that.
Okay.
So I think that it was part of the community understanding of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
And when people would die, we'd go to the funeral home and we would participate in that. And then my mother was a beautician, and she would be called in the middle of the night to come and fix someone's hair.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
yeah.
All of these very strange kind of things that went all the way back to childhood in a certain kind of way, a familiarity.
Sure.
Live and pets come and go, and cows come and go, and lambs and sheep and all of this, chickens. My grandmother would, she'd cut their head off, and teach us that you stand here and look at that because that's what we're going to eat.
Sure.
So there was a lot of that kind of understanding and inclusivity of children.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first part. And then when I was 39, I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. So I had already been, I think I was a spiritual adept from the time I was born.
Yeah.
And has already spent time in India and came back, and by that time was a very serious Zen student. My husband and I both would travel from Colorado to Daibosatsu Monastery in New York City at least 8 times a year, and sometimes we would stay a little, so we were very drenched in the Zen classics, the tradition. That was 1990.
Wow.
So when I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer, it blasted me out. It blasted my husband. We were very much in constant our work and so forth, and everything came to a halt. So through that encounter, and I will always bow to my teachers who showed up for me and, basically said, it's your opportunity. Because as many years that I had already had in spiritual traditions and, living in communes and this and that, until the moment came whenever the rubber hit the road and I didn't know whether I was going to live any longer. It had always been fairly easy on an insight level to say, oh, I know who I am. Mm-hmm. Well, whenever the rubber hit the road and my teacher looked at me and said, now are you going to be honest about that? And quite frankly, it was where I could finally say, I have tasted mystery and tasted the depth of who am I. And right now, my fear in the possibility of not living any longer has shown me something about how I'm not completely settled in that.
Wow.
So that began, I did treatment in Germany and came back really beaten up bad and still didn't know whether I was going to live or not.
Wow.
And went to the monastery in upstate New York and finally got to it, through monastic life and through deep questioning the koan work, everything about the Zen tradition and the grit of it, as well as the grace of it, profoundly came into my body, mind, heart in a way that I could sit on the edge of the needle and say, I don't know.
Wow.
So that then led to, once, there were some pretty deep surrender points within all of that, but I was prime because I didn't know whether or not I was going to live.
Yeah.
I was just sort of like prime for the activity of the spiritual work to enter in a way that it had never entered before.
Amazing. How long did that period last when you were 39 to?
39, and then the following year, like we got back in after 5 months in Germany, and I was very depressed. But part of the depression was I would sit and go, I don't know who I am. I'm not ready to die.
Right.
And just, kind of in that crunchy kind of place in myself. So that's when I went to the monastery. And quite frankly, it was like, am I going to go to Hawaii and be on the beach? Or am I going to go to Daibo Satsu and I'm going to enter into the depths of Zen practice? And I thought, well, this one.
Yeah.
So I would say for about a year in really, really deep Zen practice, then the insight started breaking open.
Wow.
And at that time, I went to my teacher and I said, may I have permission to be fully ordained in the Zen tradition? So a little bit of time went by and I went headlong into full ordination. So at that time, I became a Zen nun.
And was that your healing? Was that probably what brought you out of that? Or what do you think?
No, insight did.
Insight.
Yeah,
okay.
there were a lot of very deep
healing from within.
Openings that, were taking place just because of 6 or 7 hours of Zazen every day, along with the deep Zen structure that was going on. That's what that's designed to do, which is take you to the core of yourself, because everything begins to fall away. Anything that you want to hang your hat on as to who you think you are begins to be challenged. And, where the rubber hits the road is where the hand opens, finally. And it's sort of like the training in Zen is designed to, wherever you feel like you got a little holdout, no, that's got to go too.
Wow.
So, but I was graced that I had already had a lot of years of that training. So it wasn't like I was coming in as a so-called beginner, but I was a beginner in terms of every moment of confrontation with identity patterns and so forth were being checked and tested.
Wow.
And I could put a little zone in that says, that's why it's really good to have a good teacher. Because they're not going to let you get by with the shit you think that you can get by with. And they're doing that in a loving kind of way. The sword of Manjushri is being enacted through deep compassion. But it's a very deep confrontation with all of the elements of ego identity that we're attached to. So that was a very intense time, and I needed that level of intensity in order to fulfill something that actually was my heart's intent all along. I want to wake up.
Yeah.
And I want to wake up so that I can be the person that I am meant to be in order to serve this life. And that's how all of that, begins to have its movement and momentum and activity to it. So I was very grateful, and still am, to all of my teachers and how I was supported to be able to do that. Although, of course, the work is all here.
Yeah.
But the support by those who are the men and women of light,
Mm-hmm.
who are here all over the place, along with the trees and the clouds and the, all of the energies that are here for us to wake up. So, but it takes a certain kind of very deep longing.
Mm-hmm.
So that longing has a place to fulfill itself in relation to all of the support that's here.
Beautiful.
So that's how I got into it.
Yeah.
That's a long.
You had to walk the plank.
Had to walk the plank.
Yeah. You were put through the ultimate test.
Yeah.
Of death. And now you seem to be pretty fearless when it comes to death, which is an incredible superpower to offer people.
So when I got back after a few years, and also I can say that's where my really deep shamanic events happened, which was at the monastery. Somebody came to the monastery, and lo and behold, this is 1991, and they had ayahuasca. And I was familiar, being some degree the psychonaut that I was, but I had never heard of ayahuasca. 1991. Yeah, it's like LSD.
And a couple people knew.
Yeah.
Archaeologists, maybe a couple.
Right.
Wow.
So came to the monastery, and I was still very sick. So this was also a time whenever all of the movement within the monastic tradition was going on. Deep friend, Junpo Roshi was also someone who understood that the deep spiritual work could be enhanced by the plant medicine. So, had explored some of that while I was there. But this dude came to the monastery with ayahuasca.
Wow.
So my friend came up and said to me, "You're still sick. You're in deep monastic practice. Would you like to work with ayahuasca?" I said, "I have no idea what that is." And so he said, "It's a quintessential plant medicine and blah, 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 blah. I think that you would be worthy to give it a try." And so we arranged for a little hut, out on the other side of the monastery. And 3 of us went out, fasted for 3 days, got there, and indeed I did die.
Yeah.
They told me, he said, "This is the vine of death. Would you like?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty close anyway."
Yeah.
So, sure.
Yeah.
And it was a phenomenal, many, many hours of deep. I was finally vomiting the black stuff up of chemotherapy, the black stuff up of kind of all of my, it felt like all my karmas that were in my cells were beginning to be released through that event.
Yeah.
To the point where, about after 6 hours, I just said, "I cannot do this anymore. I cannot." And it was just like, that was it. So that was a
purification,
a death process egoically for my first visit with ayahuasca.
Wow. That was in 91.
That was in 91. So fast forward, I'm sitting up in my mountain home in 1995, I think it was. By that time, I've always been someone in the Boulder community that has worked with a lot of people, has psychotherapy, practiced a lot of group work activity, and good stuff, good work. So all of a sudden, people began to call me and say, "Oh, I have a friend who's dying. Do you think that there's something that you might be able to offer them?" And I would go, "I really don't know. I haven't been trained in any of this. All I can do is say I can share my experience and I can be with them.
Right.
Wherever they are and what they want to do, that I'll go and I'll sit and I'll be." So that's what I can offer. I'm not going to tell anybody what it is to be after death. That is not anywhere at all that I'm even interested in.
Sure.
It's like, this is the this is right now.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? And how are we being with the opportunity that death brings? That's what I know I can do.
It's amazing.
So all of a sudden, I became kind of like a death midwife,
In the early days.
just because of my own experience.
Wow.
And what I found out later was, oh, I'm so grateful for that, because I would not have. It's fine that people are trained into it, and yes, of course it is. But for me, it was through the direct encounter with my own psychology, my own fear, my own spiritual understanding that had to get to a certain kind of place where I could feel I could let go. So all of that began to happen. Then my brother calls me, Howard, and he says, first off, I want to tell you, he says, I love you so much, and I'm sorry for all the times I was a shit of a brother. And I said, what?
This is in 95.
95?
Yeah.
Yep. And I said, are you asking me for forgiveness? He said, yeah. I said, wow, where have you been?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? So he says to me, I was down on an echo tour. He was, a biologist, and he would go and he would be, leading excursions and all this and that with a group of folks. And while I was down there, I happened to ask some of the boatmen, where can I find the maestros of ayahuasca? Because, he was already way into all of that, but had never been to the Amazonian basin.
Right.
To be home base.
Sure.
on ayahuasca. So he's telling me all of this, and he says, and I've decided that I'm going to get my life together, and I'm going to stop living here stateside, and I'm going to Peru because I feel the calling to create something whereby people from around the world can come and can work with this plant medicine. And he said, and you know me? And I said, yeah. He said, I also understand that all the people of the area, all the plants of the area, everything that I love is a part of this enterprise. Beautiful. And somehow I'm going to pull all of that together.
Amazing.
So he said, do you want to come down with me? I said, well, I've got something to tell you. I said, 5 years ago at the monastery, when I was still healing, I had a friend who brought ayahuasca. I had gone to my teacher and said, is it okay? And my teacher said, yeah, I think you need to follow whatever you feel might be helpful. So I was grateful for that.
Sure.
And so I said to my brother 5 years ago, I said, one of these fine days, I'm going to go to the land where ayahuasca is grown. And I had said that right after I kind of came up out of the ceremony.
Wow.
And my friend had handed me a little glass of orange juice, and it looked like the sun of the universe. And I, did this, and I said, God, one of these days I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And that had never, ever, of course, entered my mind.
Sure.
So 5 years later,
it's amazing.
My brother grants a call, and I said, you're not going to believe this, but that was part of my healing.
Wow.
And I, at the time I said, ayahuasca is my plant medicine that has brought me, and I felt absolutely clear that I would get well from that time on, and I did.
That's amazing.
So then I started going with him, and so all of that began to come together.
Yeah.
Like somatic psychotherapy, shamanic work, my life as a Zen nun. I started out in music and art. So, all of those kind of disciplines began to come together in the midst of this thing that I call, I'm going to create a training program called Coming Full Circle. And I actually went around and trained with a few people who were sort of on the cutting edge of that, like Stephen and Andrea Levine, and Joan Halifax went to some of their very early trainings. And from there, began to find out, oh, this is what I need to do to pull together a program that can help people orient to, first and foremost, the fact that they're going to die.
Yeah.
That's got to be established first.
Come to terms with reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that fit into the spiritual work, but also contemporary things that we all need to be familiar with and how we do that. And so I began to create weekends that were sort of like, oh, this is a death intensive. And people would say things like, oh, I didn't want to tell anybody what I was doing this weekend, but I'm here, So that was more or less the beginning of that whole movement in this country to begin to make those kind of weekends more palatable.
Yeah.
And that people started saying, well, God, okay, I guess if I'm going to need to know about that, I better go educate myself around it. So that's how all of that took place.
That's amazing.
So there were many dynamics that began to come together to say, oh, I feel like I want to help people understand that.
Yeah. And you have so much to offer, but it's not going to fit on a resume or on a certification. You can't come pay $3,000 and be like, here, you're certified.
Exactly.
So I think that's amazing to hear these stories. That's the thing, is like you're just incredibly complex and the depth of you, and it's like, goodness, let's just read the book. You got to sit down and you got to read it, and I haven't had the opportunity, so this is the beginning.
Oh, I'm so glad.
But it's like, gosh, there's so much in there to unpack too,
Yeah.
And Huachuma was probably around at the time, I'm guessing, and I imagine that was its own transformational tool.
No, absolutely. Ayahuasca, of course, the vine of death from the Amazonian basin, and then Huachuma from the mountain coastal area. And, I have to put a plug in here for my brother. He was one of those people right on the edge of things.
Yeah.
And so he began to create a whole process where ayahuasca and Huachuma began to find each other. And they, created a synergetic plant medicine experience whereby one had its specialty, the other had its specialty.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all of that began to conspire with a whole movement that has been going on for the last many years.
Yeah.
To bring those plant medicines into integrity with those who feel called to do that.
Yeah. And he sure did it with integrity. And
oh yeah,
lead by example, that model, because I've never seen anyone hold that tone and that way of doing things. It's incredible. I lucked out to even be around someone like him and like you, because there is a lot of people that have good intentions, and now that the movement's taken place and there's incentives, it can get messy, and
yes, it can,
a little bit too messy, and then it can hurt people, and that whole side of it. But I sure got to see two beautiful people, two elders that have really led with integrity. So, and that's a big part of why it's nice to share these kinds of stories too, because I think that's what the new generation's always going to need, is to remember our past and to learn from the elders and to truly care.
Yes.
And your mode of being, your presence is that, even before I knew any of your story, it's you. And it's the way you look at me. It's when, I don't think I've ever cried at brunch just sitting there eating, but it's because there's this depth to you, and you actually see people, and you have a heart that is open, and you live from the heart. And your brother would do the same thing. I'd watch him look at Selva and Reina, and he'd stare at them for 6, 7, 8 minutes straight, and I'd be over here crying in the corner watching him love them. And it's rare. You don't see that as often as you should in our culture, the vulnerability and that heart-centered consciousness. So
that's, and this, Ryan, it's where you serve from. And I would say the long walk, whatever the walk is that people choose, what basically we're holding, in term, because nobody can do the work for them, but what we can reflect is the worthiness and the potentiality of every human being that we touch. We're in this totally interconnected matrix.
Right.
Instead of, these singular islands, even though we're particular,
Mm-hmm.
and particularity is an important thing to embrace. Of course it is. But what about the other piece of the totally interconnected dynamic and matrix in which we live?
Yeah.
And if we don't remember that, then we lose the basis of how love travels.
Mm.
As heart to heart.
Yeah.
Respect to respect. Honesty to honesty. And sometimes it's difficult. Of course it is. Relationship is challenging.
Yeah.
Because of what we run into in terms of our insistences and how we want it to go.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is, if there's we can somehow get close to potentiality with people who have presence and who are, I'm really interested to know you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know who you are. Because if I know who you are, then by chance, I might know something of myself that we then can evolve together.
Mm.
And that's how all of that is conspiring.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So we find each other through those avenues, and to be open in that way is such it feels a bit miraculous. It is miraculous.
Yeah.
And we get to sort of sit back into the wow moment of, oh my goodness, how does all of that go? Well, I don't know, but here we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And our culture seems to really praise having a plan.
Yeah.
I'm always asked, what are you going to do when you leave the fire department? And I've had to really work with the uncomfortability, but the truth is, you don't know what the world's going to look like and what you'll be doing, just like I didn't know I'd be living with your brother and be sitting here with you. And I've learned to just try to pay attention to what is.
Yes.
And the opportunities are right in your face.
Yeah.
Instead of you trying to have this master plan vision, which is fine. I think it's just a different orientation.
Yeah.
But myself, I'm trying to get back to just be present, be of service, be curious. And it leads to like relationships. And you never know who you're going to meet sitting on the plane or who, it's so much more of that. And then just keep learning and filling up and how you've gone on your path. And then you just offer up what you've learned. You have so much to add value to others because of all your experiences, not because you were you didn't know you'd be doing what you were doing.
Absolutely.
And I love that.
Well said.
Yeah. So I just feel like that's the beauty of you sharing your stories. It wasn't planned. You weren't like, I'm going to go help people with death and dying and transpersonal psychology.
Not in the least.
That's beautiful.
So, I'm just thinking right now of something that came my way quite a long time ago, and it was a teacher. I was in a particular teaching, and I heard this teacher say something to this person, and it was basically, you're a really good manifester, this teacher said. And so we all kind of, got perked, thought it was going to be a little zone of manifestation stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, you might consider that you have to be really careful about the fact that you're a good manifester, because you have to remember that sometimes you're manifesting out of your karmic desire. Nothing wrong with that. But that may or may not be in your best interest.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a collective gasp.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we get on the manifestation trail.
Yeah.
And again, like as you say, nothing wrong with that. And it produces and creates all kinds of good stuff. Hopefully good stuff. until
Hopefully.
you run into maybe some of the inevitable challenges that come around, because all of the activity within those good plans can also turn into shadowy elements.
And so many unintended consequences that you just can't measure if you don't pull back and hit the brakes.
Way unintentional consequences that unfortunately have suffering in it.
Yeah.
So I'm just responding to that view that somehow there's a balance in what we're talking about. We have this koan in Zen, and it's one of the what we call pith koans, because it applies to everything and it goes on forever. And it's not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. So if you can feel like just for a moment that there's no way to know the mystery, that's why it's called a mystery. Or it's like you and I sitting here together do not have a clue as to what 5 minutes from now may hold for either one of us or for anything.
Sure.
And it's going on all over the place, you know? So not knowing then is a invitation to get in there with the mind's insistence around control. Yeah, the one way to try to control our life is to think that we know what it's going to do and what it's about.
Yeah.
And the fact is, yes, that's a part of reality and how we plan, and that's a good human thing, that capacity and function. But to go, oh yeah, I know that that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's totally false.
Right.
So that koan then is designed to dislodge all of the control factors and say, what happens whenever I give myself over to this that you were speaking about earlier? And the surprise of the universe that keeps happening because of the depth of connectors. And then what happens whenever the connectors is falling into what we call love? What if that's the big priority?
Right.
Love moves, love prevails, love is a universal. And that's where we begin to cast our lot.
Yeah.
So not knowing is most intimate, meaning that if I put down my control factors, then there's an intimacy that begins to fulfill itself, that has something in it that brings me closer to you, closer to life, closer to whatever.
Sure.
My cup of tea, or
it's like the beginner's mind, or the surrender experiment.
Precisely beginner's mind.
Yeah, beginner's mind. It's hard to do, but it's a practice.
It's a practice.
Just constantly trying to let go a little bit. And
yes.
Faith is letting go, not clinging to what we know.
Correct.
Tough practice, but it's nice to know that there is even a practice there to aim for.
Yes.
If anything. I'm always grateful that I'm even aware that there's a there.
There's a there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the great mystery traditions and mystic traditions, I think, have a little slice of where they do things really well. And I can say that Zen really does what we're talking about well, because it's challenging the mind, and therefore the heart mind, in all the ways that it's, basically allowing itself to surrender to a vaster orientation than what I can nail down.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciating your view and what you have established within your own practice, and what you can bring back to yourself and question it, and actually invite yourself to let go with. And that's, the blessing of spiritual practice. We're already what we seek, but the distance between knowing that consciously And just saying that has a walk to make.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our journey that we get to do and be. And what a blessing that we even have the there to there
Yeah.
that you're talking about.
Nice.
And
The
that's
orientation.
not available to everyone.
Right.
But if they grow their dissatisfaction, meaning, oh, I'm aware that all of this, as nice as it is not essence.
Right.
And if I can get a hold of that and really begin to face into where that lives inside myself, then it's amazing what begins to open,
Mm-hmm.
what begins to come to us as a way of supporting those insights to open.
Yeah.
And therefore we live and die well.
Yeah. And I heard you before we hit record talk about appreciation and love being almost two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
something along those lines. And I've
Yes.
always been curious about that. And I'm curious to hear what your perspective is on appreciation and love being maybe a vibrational state that we aim for if we were to actually get to the essence of what are we doing here?
Yes.
What is the point, regardless of what if you're a plumber or a doctor or what are we doing at the core, the eternal game or the core of our being? And it seems like it comes to that. First prayer should be, thank you for letting me have something from nothing.
Yes.
At least that's where I begin. And it really helps, and it's really healing for me at least. And I always want to share that when I'm laying in bed at night and I'm buzzing and I'm going, man, I'm just here. I'm having something, and I'm really connected to what is, which is awareness and love. And it's like, how do you share that with people? It's like, well, you have to be that, I guess. Try. And it's like, that's an aim, hopefully, to just try to be more appreciative of life itself and others. But I'm curious how you've come
I
to.
think you just did it really well.
Well, you do it in your mode of being.
I think I just want to let that alone because
All
you
right.
did it really, really well, my friend.
Well, you do too, because everyone I've met that knows you, and I try to get to know you through others, because you're not one to just go out and talk about yourself unless you really ask. And I haven't had enough time to ask you all the deep questions, but other people know that you're just so loving and so present with them. And that's the ripple, is your life. It's the everyday experience and your interactions with everyone that you know.
Yes.
So I just think you're.
Well, I feel, one thing that you said earlier, you were mentioning qualities and you said curious. It's like that curiosity of what and how and, the awe,
Mm-hmm.
AWE, that comes through those levels of curiosity are what I would say brings me great joy and connection.
Mm.
So many, many, many different times during the day, if I am remembering to take the pause, meaning just to drop back for a minute and have a look around and just kind of feel like, oh my goodness, look at all this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no definition to it. There might be order, and there might be a felt sense of, being inside this this great theater.
You're right.
But where that genuine leads me is that I'm just dumbstruck.
Yeah.
I'm just dumbstruck.
Yeah. So humbling.
It is.
Yeah.
Because I can cast my lot within it, and serve it and all of that stuff. But I mean, like, source.
Yeah.
Source.
Just everything's happening and you're just in it.
Just in it.
Yeah. And it's nice once in a while to remind ourselves with,
Yeah.
whether it be a Zen practice or a plant teacher or a breath practice, there's ways to engage that to more of an intense level. And you and your brother both spent your time there.
Yes.
And that helps.
It
and then
does.
your teachers, like you said, but
It does.
It's amazing. It's unfortunate too that it's not more prevalent in the right way
Yeah.
to where everyone gets to have a little more childlike wonder and appreciation for the basics.
That's to me where we're cultural rebels in a particular kind of way.
Mm.
Because the mainline Western culture is about I'm going to succeed.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whatever succeed means as to how we construct succeed.
Yeah.
And it's usually connected with materiality,
Or status or
status, all of that.
hmm.
And until, some such wonderful thing that might happen every now and then when we get the real knock at the door.
Hmm.
And that comes through all kinds of various life experiences. Plus just waking up one morning and going, oh, I don't think so after all. I mean, all of this.
Yeah.
Um, so I do trust that life sometimes brings those kind of correctors if we have the courage to follow them,
Right.
and courage it takes, because we've grown very comfortable and complacent in a certain kind of way
Hmm.
in order to maintain something that we have determined is really, really important.
Right.
And until all of that has a way of being seen through or crumbling actually right in front of us, and we have enough good sense to open our hand and say, well, as a matter of fact, there may be something else,
Mm.
it's really hard to, poke at the crust
Yeah.
that lives around that. And we're all contributing to it. So
Hmm.
I don't want to come across like somebody that's got all that worked out.
No.
But I'm grateful for the times whenever I can see very clearly.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we all have beautiful homes and things and all that comprises what we call a good life.
Hmm.
I truly am very grateful for that. But I'm also grateful to know that it's just a little bit of the icing on the cake.
Right. I remember one of the best experiences I was having with your brother was when he would bring us on the boat rides to meet the indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
and we're on the heart medicine, the Huachuma,
Yeah.
but it helped you to really see the joy and connection, even not knowing the same language. And these people had no electricity, most of them, and
Right.
they're barefoot and they're joyful. And I remember I didn't know then, I knew it was a powerful experience, but then living with him, he orchestrated every little element to make it so special in that way so that you would have that connection to
Yeah.
truly remember that the Western success is a facade
Yeah.
and it's not bad. Thank you for this technology that we're even using now on the plane to get here, and all of it's part of the Dharma or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's nice to be reminded that you don't need any of it,
Yeah.
you know. And it's the connection with people and your basic fundamental needs being met, which is pretty simple.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that we can't seem to figure out how to get our planet to balance that out a little, but it's the human condition, it seems,
Seems that way.
Yeah.
And, to kind of roll that back around to death preparedness,
Hmm.
when we're getting ready to die, everything, everything that is in form, from our bodies to other people to whatever might be around us, our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, all that it comprises a human being,
Hmm.
lights out. Now, that will either be something that we can surrender back toward, or we've had no preparation whatsoever
Hmm.
in understanding that all of this is good and nice and it's the world of form.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But at the time of death, then what?
Yeah.
So, part of what you're saying, if we're going to go counter to that in the course of a life, then it will be much more difficult. As the old saying goes, let's hope we die before we die.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning coming to a very profound insight that all of this is the passing show.
Yeah.
And then you can say, what's real?
Yeah.
So, everything that we're talking about, if you kind of can feel it, begins to roll back to
Mm-hmm.
this great design of the universe, which is arising and falling,
Yep.
arising, falling. So it
Mm-hmm.
goes. Universes form themselves.
Yep.
Stars form themselves, and they black hole it. Whatever.
So don't get too caught up in it and attached to any of it, as far as the story and the worrying about stuff that you can't even wrap your head around.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea, because you're just carrying around that dis-ease.
Yeah.
And yeah, death is such an amazing teacher, and you have so much insight to that. Just from spending time with so many people that have gone through that, and you've probably seen so many dynamics of the suffering on top of.
Yeah.
I can just tell, in recently, when I was at your workshop a month ago, my aunt, I got a text while I was at your workshop from my mother, and her sister recently passed about 2 weeks ago, but someone who had not prepared for this experience. And it's just, you get to see what happens to the family dynamics. And I just kept thinking of you and how many of those you've seen and helped. And yeah, you've got a lot of insight into that. And so it's powerful. And it's something that I think our culture is starting to pay attention to slowly because of people like you. And
yes.
So that's good.
Well, I have a little theory that takes it back to the a lot to the patriarchal orientation to control. But we've left nature, and if we have left our nature, which is the nature,
Sure.
and we have actually created systems where we want to control all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep extracting and extracting and extracting and extracting without the understanding of the great reciprocal process.
Yep.
Then the pushing away of death is one of the reasons why all of this is taking place.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because we're not in touch with the dynamic of the balance.
Right. And you can see it with like the transhumanists and the people that are full on board with like, we have to live forever. And it's just all coming from that fundamental root. And then it creates a whole incentivization and a culture built around it.
Thank you.
It's so intense. But I'm sure it's happened, throughout history. Like Shavin is now in rebel. And yeah, so that's interesting.
So, everything that you keep coming back to, it's you're observing and you're feeling from deep within you about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring it back to your own heart, and your heart breaks whenever you behold the disorienting factor. And where it brings a people, where it brings culture, where it brings the squirrels, the trees.
There's grief there.
Oh, such grief.
Yeah. That was a part that I wanted to ask you about, was your concept of grief and your relationship to how we just don't grieve and how terrible that is. You helped me with that when I called you about that horrific call. I'll never forget that. Full circle, talk about friends helping friends and not knowing that I'd have you for that time in my life. But thank God I did, because I called therapists and I needed some help. I said, this 8-year-old girl got severely burned and her mother died in a fire. It was an intense call, but I called you and you helped me to understand why I hurt so much was because I loved and cared so much. And it was as simple as that. And I needed to hear it feedback wise. And it was so profound. I think of it all the time. And I share it with people in breath work, and it's just such a simple statement, but it's so true.
Yes.
And so anyway, the grief and your understanding of it, It'd be
Yeah,
nice
I
to.
mean, to me, grief as a process, it's first and foremost, it's always here, and it's magnified at different times with different events.
Mm,
But our heart is breaking open a lot of the time, and the thing that does not get taken care of in our emotional bodies, and I see it a lot, is that they have not stopped long enough to just engage the feeling of the deep sadness that they're walking with, and particularly in the time that we're in now.
mm,
I feel that everybody knows, Leonard Cohen's song,
mm-hmm.
everybody
Yeah.
knows. We all know. And we're all walking around with an enormous grief
Mm-hmm.
of the loss of the purity of our natural realms.
Yeah. There's a hospice situation here almost for the
Oh,
planet, and
it's a deep hospice situation,
yeah,
and
no one's
it's not
looking
being
at it.
attended
Yeah.
to, right?
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, people like Joanna Macy, her work and so forth, to really feel, take yourself where you can see it, and take yourself where, there people are living in the destructive element of where our greed and hatred and our insistences upon whatevers are playing out, and there's enormous amount of people that are already suffering very deeply from it.
Mm-hmm.
As of yet, we might say, well, I'm not really very affected by that. To me, that is just an indicator that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel
Yeah.
the depth of what is already in the vibrational field
Yeah.
of where that lives with all of us.
It's a protection mechanism, isn't
Yeah,
it? Just
and,
not to.
it is, and like you're offering people the breath work. It's like there's some kind of longing inside ourselves to open that part of us, to let it air itself out, because there's a lot of suffering going on because we don't do that.
Mm.
And we walk around with just like pent up grieving and sadness and longing for the connectors, so that we're not living this life of
Mm.
separation from actually what I feel like we all care so much about, but we have forgotten we care so much.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the thing with you love and you care. That's why you grieve.
Right.
If you didn't love and care,
You wouldn't hurt.
you wouldn't hurt.
Yep.
So if we avoid or want to push back hurting for whatever reason, then we will be pushing back a lot of our life force, because it's all locked up in the denial element, and that's energy.
Yeah. And distraction.
Oh,
It seems like that's
distraction.
the tool that's being used, or
It
that's what's
is.
happening, distraction and momentum,
Correct.
and even the abuse of drugs.
Yes.
When we give ourselves too much of too many things and we glorify things,
Correct.
because then you're just feeling good, just good enough to get by. It's like pain management, but
Yep.
you're supposed to listen to those signals. And it
Absolutely.
seems like even breath work for me is like, just give people an hour to slow down, and
Precisely.
let them tap into the courageous act of feeling, which is like, that sounds easy to lay down for an hour and breathe, but it's the hardest thing for a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
and that's what you've done for people in different ways.
Yeah.
But it sounds silly from the outside when people go, what are you doing in there with breath work? Why would you meditate? Why would you? But that's what I imagine a real meditative practice is, to come and encounter the truth. And it's for everyone, it's going to be a little different, but
Yes.
yeah, there's sadness in that too. I don't know how
Absolutely.
many times I've wept on plant medicines for the first half hour because it all hits at once and it's finally amplified and you're like, oh yeah, I've been just moving through life busy.
Yeah.
I've been busy avoiding this, or just because you're busy because we have to live in this world. But so it's interesting.
I do feel, everything that you're saying, you're living into a deeper and deeper contact with that, which makes you more available to being able to assist other people toward that.
Mm.
I think you said it at one point in the Coming Full Circle about what you see in the firehouse.
As a death.
As like the men and women who are not close in to being able to feel where their lives are really entangled in the grieving that's going on. They're actually serving people all day long who are having trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, then how does all of that move through one? And a lot of it is like, I'm just going to distract myself and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to not go there or to not really take on the emotional context of what I've just been doing all day.
Yeah.
And that goes on in hospitals.
Sure.
It goes on all over the place. So, but particularly in service-oriented situations where that is literally what you are there to do.
Right.
Which is to assist others whenever they're in the depth of a suffering situation. Okay, now what do you do in terms of maintenance of your emotional and energy body as those kind of very intense situations are reflected back to you? So, you let me know about that whenever you had this incident with the young girl.
Yeah.
And I could feel, oh, you've been doing a lot of years of that.
Sure.
And maybe right now is the opportunity whereby you'll open that channel. And from now on, you'll be finding out how you clarify your own life within all of those different events that are happening.
Yeah.
And to find out about that and to be true to it, I don't know what else there is that gives meaning to life in the way in which we're talking about it now.
Right.
So I'm so grateful for you and the track that you've been on, and you have been for many, many years, but at least from what I know of you, the last few years have been more of a very dedicated track that you have found your way, and you still are finding your way. And now you're at a place where you have enough of that experience laid down within you that you can begin to grant other people the possibility. That's what I see for you.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting life. I remember early on, we're not taught.
The Grateful Dead.
The Grateful Dead, yeah. Long, strange trip.
Strange trip,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I almost thought about quitting when I had about 7 or 8 years on because I just didn't know what to do with some of the stuff I was seeing. And, people in their spiritual journey hit a certain point where it's the first 80% hits you and the first 10% of the journey, right? And that happened to me with floating and plant medicines all at once, and the hair grew long. But the culture doesn't understand that, and you expect everybody to understand but then you go, okay, hold on, I'm seeking validation and I'm seeking this, this, and this. And I had to slow down, pump the brakes, and not escape and leave the culture and realize that, oh, these are good people. They're just hurt, they're just good. We just don't have the right tools and techniques and equipment to deal with this stuff. So, and the culture has its beauty, and then it has its wounds.
Yeah.
And so I've just tried to live within it and stay healthy inside of it, which I've been blessed to do. Thank God for that. But it's been quite it's led me to many different teachers like your brother and now you and Bella, who slowed me down and let me read books and stay home instead of getting busy. So many things that just helped me realize that this is the real stuff. This whole fire service thing is just a little chapter, beautiful chapter, but it's a death like everything else. And so I'm preparing for that death, just like I prepared for your brother's when he was on my couch. I remember seeing him as a ghost already and trying to really hone in and be with him and look at him. And really, I was with him. I remember that because I'd lay my head down at night and pray and just be like, wow, this is very temporary and it's very special, but I'm doing my best to be present for it and to try to help to the best of my capacity. And that was all I could do. And that was nice that I even knew that I don't think I would have 2 years prior, And then when he passed, and it's like, then Bella passed. And I remember before she did, I was looking at her as a ghost, and every moment is lucid. And the lucidity of it to me is the real, like you and me now. This is it. And I love that about life now. Driving here and flying here, it was like the whole time I was already in your field. And I was already dreaming about you and thinking about you and just so grateful for any of it. We could have not done any recording and we could just being with you is I feel lucky. And I told a friend yesterday, we went and saw Krishna Das. He played in town. I'd never seen him. I've always listened to him. But after it was over, I just said, you know what? After tomorrow, I could die and be happy because I'm going to get to hang out with Reta, So I really do appreciate you. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I have one question to ask before we maybe hit, I don't know what time, it's 5:11. So we're late.
We're late.
Yeah,
we're late
what would
for
you
a
tell
very
what would you
important
tell
date.
the world if this was the last time you were able to speak to them? If we were going to die at our dinner?
I would say to just slow it all down.
Slow down.
Slow it all down and be a part of, rather than holding oneself separate as an observer. Get in there and be the life that you are. And if you be the life that you are, you will also be the death that you are. All of it is just here right now, and it's all passing. If you know you're going to die, something in you goes, wow, and I want to be sure that I have every moment that I have while I'm still here to offer myself in love, in kindness, in service, grieve what I need to grieve, and just be as much of a human being as I'm meant to be.
I love that.
So there you have it.
Thank you so much. I love you. It's an honor to know you.
Thank you, dear Ryan.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.